Okay, so you know we have almost no controllability. Very little elevator and almost no aileron. We're controlling the turns by power. I don't think we can turn right, but I think we can only make left turns. Well, we're starting a little bit of a left turn right now. I mean, we can only turn right, we can't turn left.
United 232 Heavy, understand, sir. You can only make right turns?
That's affirmative.
2403 Ogden, Sioux Gateway, runway 31. 2403 Ogden, Sioux Gateway, runway 31. Have a DC-10, 4 to 5 miles east. It's lost one engine. 10-4, engine 3.
Engine 3 is 10-4, answering a 300 block of South Floyd.
Engine 3 answering from 300 South Floyd. Engine 5.
10-4.
Car 19.
10-4, call 19.
United 232 Heavy, safe souls on board and fuel remaining.
We have 37.6 fuel and we're counting the solar.
Roger. United 232 Heavy, Souix City.
We have no hydraulic fluid, which means we have no elevator control, almost none, and very little aileron control. I have serious doubts about making the airport. Have you got someplace near there that we might be able to ditch? Unless we get control of this airplane, we're going to put it down wherever it happens to be.
United 232 Heavy, roger, stand by 1. United 232 Heavy, say again.
Where's the airport to us now as we come spinning down here?
United 232 Heavy, Sioux City Airport's about 12 o'clock and 36 miles.
Okay, we're trying to go straight. We're not having much luck.
Station all rigs en route to the airport. Be advised, this is now an alert 3. I repeat, it's an alert 3. They're advising that the DC-10 is 5 miles south. They won't be able to make the runway. 1534.
232. We're going to try to put it in the Sioux City.
United 232 Heavy, understand you're going to try to make it into Sioux City? There's no airports out that way that can accommodate you, sir.
Okay, we'll head for Sioux City. We got a little bit of control back there. How long is the runway?
United 232 Heavy, the airport, the runway is 9,000 feet long, 150 foot wide.
Okay, thank you.
And United 232 Heavy, did you get the souls on board count?
Never mind. Hey, right now, we don't even have time to let go to call the gal.
Roger.
292.
Roger, thank you.
Car 19, you have it. The aircraft is now 32 miles northeast, headed in toward the runway. Still descending, 292 people on board.
10-4. 718 to engine 3 and engine 5. Engine 5, go ahead. The aircraft is now coming in from the north, so Assistant Chief would like you to return to the interstate around the airport area. Car 19 to Red Dog 1. Red, the Red Dog 1. Yeah, Jim, I'm going to go out on the highway northeast and I'll keep you alert. Roger, thank you. Car 18 to car 19. Car 19, go ahead. Do you want me to come down that way somewhere and help you? Well, we're going down on the highway now, but you're going to have to try because if she can't make it, we don't know where she's going to go in at. Okay, 10-4, I'll head that direction and try to help you out. 4, get all the companies back in the house if you can. 10-4. 18 to station. Go ahead. All companies that are out inspecting, everything back to the station immediately.
10-4.
United 232 Heavy, do you think you'll be able to hold about a 240 heading?
We got one turn to it right now.
Roger. When you get turned to that 240 heading, sir, the airport will be about 12 o'clock at 38 miles.
Okay, we're trying to control it just by power alone now. We have no hydraulics at all, so we're doing our best here.
Roger, and we've notified the equipment out in that area too, sir. The equipment's here on the airport standing by, and they're sending some out to that area.
Engine 3 to car 19. Car 19, go ahead. Well, we're standing by at South Outer Belt and Interstate 29. 10-4 is, we just don't know where they're going to come in at, so we'll try to keep you advised. 10-4, thank you. Yeah, 232, we're going to have to continue one more right turn. We've got the elevators pretty much under control within 300 or 400 feet, but we still can't do much of the steering.
United United 232 Heavy, roger. Understand you do have the elevators possibly under control. We'd be able to hold altitude.
Negative. We don't have it. We are better, that's all.
Roger. United 232 Heavy, there is a small airport at 12 o'clock and 7 miles. The runway's 4,000 feet long there.
Hey, I'm controlling it myself right now. As soon as the captain gets back on, he'll give me a hand here. He's talking on PA.
Roger.
Okay, United 232, we're starting a left turn back to the airport. Since we have no hydraulics, braking is going to really be a problem. I would suggest the equipment be towards the far end of the runway. And I think under the circumstances, regardless of the condition of the airplane when we stop, we're going to evacuate. So you might notify the ground crew equipment that we're going to do that.
United 232 Heavy, Wilco, sir, and if you can continue that left turn to about a 220 heading, sir, that'll take you right to the airport.
20 now.
Car 18 and Car 19, the county emergency vehicles have been notified. MAC 1 is on standby. We've got one ambulance running out Highway 20 eastbound.
10-4 on 19. On 19 is the Red Dog. Go ahead, Red Dog. Did you receive that last transmission on this aircraft coming in? Negative. Okay, he's coming in. No brakes. He requests all emergency vehicles to position themselves on the northwest side of the runway because he's not sure he's going to be able to stop. Does he think he can make the runway now? We're not sure that either. But if he does make the runway, he doesn't have any hydraulic systems whatsoever, I guess. No brakes or hydraulics. So he is going to come in from the south. Affirmative. 10-4.
United 232 Heavy, you're going to have to widen out just slightly to your left, sir, to make the turn to final, and also that'll take you away from the city.
Whatever you do, keep us away from the city.
Car 19 to comm, sir.
Car 19, go ahead.
I have a command post set up at the city maintenance guys at the airport. Any emergency vehicles that's requested will report to the maintenance shed.
10-4.
All additional emergency vehicles are now at the command post. Understand the emergency vehicles at command post. 10-4.
United 232 Heavy, been advised there is a 4-lane highway up in that area, sir, if you can pick that up.
Okay, we'll see what we can do here. We've already put the gear down, and we're going to have to be putting on something solid if we can.
United 232 Heavy, roger. Can you pick up a road or something up there?
We're trying. It's still anywhere from 2,000 feet up to 1,500 down now in waves.
Roger. Come on. United 232 Heavy, can you hold that heading, sir?
Yeah, we're on it now for a little while.
United 232 Heavy, roger. That heading will put you, currently 15 miles northeast of the airport. If you can hold that, it'll put you on about 3-mile final.
Okay, we're giving it heck.
Station to all rigs. This aircraft is 6 miles east of Hinton and still descending.
Ready for has the plane in sight at Lawton. He is descending. 4. Car 19 to Red Dog 1. I copy that, Car 19. 10-4. Command post Maple. Go ahead. The Medi-Corps advises he has plenty has good altitude. It appears he might make it. 10-4. Center, this is Engine 6. We have a DC-9 coming, 10 coming across, just over Morningside Avenue.
10-4.
We got him in sight over here.
United 232 Heavy, roger. The airport's currently at your 1 o'clock position, 10 miles. And United 232 Heavy, if you can't make the airport, sir, there is an interstate that runs north to south to the east side of the airport. It's a 4-lane interstate.
We're just passing it right now. We're going to crash the airport.
United 232 Heavy, roger. And advise when you get the airport in sight.
Got a runway in sight. We'll be with you very shortly. Thanks a lot for your help.
United 232 Heavy, the wind's currently 360 at 11, 360 at 11. You're cleared to land on any runway.
You want to be particular and make it a runway, huh? Say the wind one more time.
Wind 010 at 11.
Okay, we're all three talking at once. Say it again one more time.
010 at 11, and there is a runway that's closed, sir, that could probably work too. The south, it runs northeast to southwest.
Pretty well lined up on this one, or I think we will be.
All right.
Yep.
United 232 Heavy, roger, sir. Yeah, that's a closed runway. That'll work, sir. We're getting the equipment off the runway, and they'll line up for that one.
How long is it?
6,600 feet, 6,600, and the equipment's coming off.
Truck 3 to car 19. Car 19, go ahead. Yeah, we're at the industrial interchange right now, and we've got a large airplane coming in from the northeast. They look like they do have plenty of altitude at this time, but we're not sure that this is the engine, or this is the plane. 10-4, he's sending now. We hope he can make it in here, but what happens when he gets in is another thing.
At the end of the runway, it's just a wide open field, so sir, so the length won't be a problem.
Okay. Isolate this.
Plane of 19, he's coming down real fast on the south end. Okay, all right, come on, there, he's on fire. Down. Car 19, engine 3, engine. Emergency, car 19, come on, give us a hand out here. The circle is down. And for all of them coming in the same body on the failure, I'm going to the scene. Car 19, go ahead.
Well, but what situation out there?
Well, the plane is completely demolished on the ground.
10-4, you're going to need a lot of additional assistance out there, it sounds like.
At 10-4, I got engine 3, engine 5, and truck 3. I'm going out to the scene now. I'll advise you in just a few minutes.
10-4, I'm going to go ahead and go en route out there to the command post. Let me advise anything that you need. I'll have the comm center go ahead and notify emergency hospitals and all the ambulance.
I don't think there's any one common basis point that you can point a finger at. I think there's several things. First being, I think the size of the community has a lot to do with it in respect that each one of the principal agencies, key person, knows the other people and knows them on a personal basis. Those people then are a part of and a party to the overall disaster planning process. The committee meets every month, plus the fact that I think because we work on a day-to-day basis with each other, the fire department interacts with Siouxland Health Services, the ambulatory provider for the city. We interact with EOC, Emergency Operations Center personnel, and rescue efforts, so that we work together on a daily basis in many of our everyday emergency operations. So we're familiar with each other, we're familiar with the key players, and we're also familiar with each other's operations.
Our function is really to work with all facets of the community, private, public, governmental, all agencies that would come together and work towards the mitigation of a crisis situation once it happens. We get into a lot of the pre-planning, getting really the community prepared, trying to get the agencies to mix their resources, to work together towards the one plan that means the same to everybody in the community, rather than everybody having separate agendas when it comes to planning. Emergency plans need to parallel each other from the very basic facility plan, maybe that a business would have, all the way through the federal or state and federal plans. And that's really the purpose of this agency under the disaster services side.
Through this committee, we grew in time. We knew what type of individuals we needed on the committee. We knew what different expertise we needed on this disaster committee. And through the 2 years we've been in existence, we tried to enlist people that would contribute to this agency, and probably the most contributing factor was cooperation. In 1987, October 1987, we held a disaster drill at the airport. During this drill, we tested our plan. We found the weaknesses, a lot of weaknesses in our plan, and corrected the weaknesses we felt that were, would be a problem. And again, I have to emphasize that the cooperation, coordination between all the organizations was the key to this thing.
I think the disaster drill played a major role, the airport disaster drill, and in fact all the disaster drills that we do. First of all, they allow interagency cooperation and interaction between the agencies. That takes place on a day-to-day basis in our community because of the way the system is designed, but it's also enhanced by working with other people in disaster drill settings. Certainly we were able to plan out various locations that we were going to establish triage and command and things such as that. In the airport disaster drill, we were able to plan out in advance entrance areas to the airport as well as exit areas from the airport for emergency vehicles so they weren't crossing paths. That type of thing was extremely helpful.
This is Dave Nixon at KTIV Channel 4, interrupting with another news bulletin about an air disaster at the Souix City Airport. It happened just before 4 o'clock this afternoon. A DC-10 with 292 people on board, United Flight 232, en route from Denver to Chicago, tried to make an emergency landing at the Souix City Airport and crashed. We have reporters on the scene.
A major air disaster in Sioux City, a United Airlines DC-10 with about 292 people on board, crashed just short of the Sioux Gateway Airport at 4 o'clock this afternoon. The plane had lost all hydraulic pressure, we're told, and was trying to make an emergency landing at the Sioux Gateway when it crashed.
232 Heavy, roger, sir. Yeah, that's a closed runway. That'll work, sir. We're getting the equipment off the runway, and they'll line up for that one.
How long is it?
6,600 feet, 6,600, and the equipment's coming off.
Isolate this.
Well, when the aircraft impacted the ground and started cartwheeling, there was a giant fireball following the aircraft, and along with the aircraft veered off, and there was another large fireball that went across runway 3517. The aircraft then flipped on its back and went into the cornfield. The fire was concentrated around and under the wings of the aircraft after it had entered the cornfield upside down. The fireball that had erupted across 3517 dissipated and eventually went out by itself. There was a few little grass fires left. There was a few areas of debris that were burning, but none were significant enough to even waste our time on trying to extinguish these areas. We concentrated on reaching the main body of the aircraft, and the only difficulty we really had was getting our equipment through the debris field and the injured people that were in the seats and also were laying on the ground in and around the runway, and then also there was a lot of people that were around the aircraft itself where it came to rest, in the cornfield, all around the aircraft really.
out there?
Well, that's all okay. This thing is completely demolished on the ground.
10-4, you're going to need a lot of additional assistance out there, it sounds like.
At 10-4, I got engine 3, engine 5, and truck 3. I'm going out to the scene now. I'll probably get just a few minutes.
Upon responding up the runway, we encountered dense smoke and a snowstorm of paper that had came out of the aircraft on impact. The fireball had subsided somewhat at that time. We rounded the corner off of 2204 onto 3517 runway, and that was the area where we encountered all the walking wounded, the survivors, the injured people, and at that point our vehicles had to come to a stop. We actually had to get out of our vehicles and walk our way through the debris, the victims, and the injured parties till we got to the area where the main fuselage had went upside down into the cornfield and was burning in the cornfield. There's probably some key things that we found out during this disaster that I feel is key, and one of the things was the fact that we didn't use sirens on the crash fire vehicles, that the other responding emergency vehicles did use sirens. The walking wounded and the other survivors were keyed in on those sirens coming from the staging area. They were walking towards those sirens and helping other victims towards the sirens. And this probably, I feel, was instrumental in the victims and the walking wounded people from stopping our emergency vehicles or crash fire vehicles from getting to the fire scene. The other thing was that I wore identifying clothing that identified me as the fire chief. When I was approaching the aircraft upside down cornfield, several people approached me and gave me information about victims in the aircraft, where they were trapped at. The first truck that was a dispensing agent was a P-19. We had two people on the P-19. The agent lasted less than 2 minutes. The agent water lasted less than 2 minutes. Those two people immediately after they dispensed all the agent in the truck, got out of their truck, took the hand line, and went around to the fuselage side of the aircraft. They also give some time to those people inside the aircraft, and there were accounts in the newspaper Sunday where some of the victims related to our firefighters soaking with foam and they're being able to go through the foam. There was a problem with the aircraft as it had flipped upside down. It had compressed, I guess you'd say, the roof of the aircraft had compressed down and actually could not penetrate through the aircraft with any type of hose streams because of debris and the fact that the aircraft had compressed itself. In order to actually extinguish the aircraft fire, you have to actually get inside the aircraft, such as a structural fire, put your self-contained breathing apparatus, get the hand lines, actually fight the fire as you would any type of structural fire, and that's what we had to do. It was very hot. Of course, we had a running fuel fire that was inside the aircraft from the ruptured fuel tanks, and so the personnel that actually entered the aircraft, they were subject to extreme heat, such as around 1,800 degrees, and they used the cooling effect of the foam in the water to help those people get into the aircraft and eventually extinguish the fire. Pressurized vessels were a problem because we, as you know, we were not familiar where they were in the aircraft. We knew where the fuel tanks were. We did not know where all the pressurized vessels were located, such as the oxygen tanks, the firefighting bottles, and so on and so forth. And there were numerous explosions during the fire. And this did pose a serious hazard to our firefighters. If they were anywhere near when one of these vessels exploded, they could have been injured real severely. In this case, we needed a lot of AFFF foam for the reason that dry chemical, we don't carry that we don't carry that amount of dry chemical to combat that large of a fire situation. And AFFF foam seems to be the universal agent, and it's probably the best agent to date that you can use on a flammable liquid type of fire.
My function was triage officer. I was about 3 minutes after the initial crash till I arrived on scene. At that time, they'd already established a staging area for the victims, and my job when I reached there was to go up into the crash area and evaluate the victims and triage them according to what priority they would be. I would evaluate them, prioritize them as levels 1, 2, 3, and then they would take them to the designated area. The injuries that I saw was a lot of fractures, burns, not so much respiratory inhalation problems. It was more physical burns to the skin and fractures, lacerations. Those were the majority of them that came towards me. As far as the area ambulances, their main function was back in the staging area with transporting people to the hospitals. The people we utilized as litter bearers for the most part were the air guard that were on duty at the air base at the time and were basically on scene when the initial crash took place. They served as the litter bearers. They would find a patient. They were trained how to put them onto a backboard, bring them to me where I would evaluate them, like I said, and then they would go to their appropriate area where more treatment was done until they were being able to be transported to the city. We treated them the most we could without hindering transportation to the hospital. If there was a delay due to lack of ambulances, we were able to go ahead and initiate the IVs, intubate if needed, this sort of treatment, treat for shock. And that was also continued en route to the hospital. So it was whatever we had time to do without hindering transportation to the hospital.
Treatment on the tarmac at the airport was limited to basic care, basic airway management, basic control of severe bleeding, and basic circulatory management problems. Those are basic care issues that are taught at the emergency medical technician level. And our paramedics then were operating, for the large part, at a basic emergency medical technician level where they were drawing on their basic skills to handle the situation. Once the patient was into the triage area and the treatment area, more advanced care was taking place, more definitive therapy. And that's where the paramedics' role was coming in. More advanced airway maneuvers were taking care of patients, were intubated endotracheally. IVs were started for fluid replacement. And basically that was the type of advanced care that was taking place. The actual true definitive care was held off until the patient arrived at the hospital. So the cooperation and interaction between paramedics and emergency medical technicians, basic emergency medical technicians on scene, was really that they had a common ground to be working at as they were dealing with basic situations and basic treatment. One of our hospitals in the city is a designated trauma center, so our patients who are suffering primarily from multiple system trauma were initially triaged to that hospital. The other hospital in the city is a designated burn center, and patients whose primary problems were burns were initially triaged to that hospital. The transport time by ground from the triage area to the hospitals was actually pretty similar to transport time by air. Approximately 7 or 8 minutes would elapse from the time the patient left the triage treatment area until they arrived at the hospital. We have one hospital that's about 2 miles further north, and we could add another 2 minutes onto that. And you could also shave off approximately 2 minutes for helicopter operations. Understand that in our community, when we deal with helicopter operations, there's also a ground transport component where the patient is transported from the helipad the half a block or a block into the hospital. So that adds another minute to helicopter transport time. Flight 232 impacted at the airport at 1 minute after 4. By some 35 to 40 minutes later, all the seriously injured patients from that situation had been triaged and transported out of the scene and, in fact, had arrived at the hospital. Approximately an hour and 15 minutes into the situation, all patients had been triaged out of the crash site and had been distributed either to the hospital or to a separate ambulatory care triage area established at the airport that was away from the crash site. Approximately 3 hours after impact, all patients, all live victims of this airliner crash had been transported to the hospitals. And we did make a conscious decision on site that irregardless of the person's lack of complaint, all people involved in the crash would be transported to hospitals and checked. We had probably 15 serious burn patients, some critical. We had several minor burns with patients that were involved in heavily traumatized situations. The trauma that we saw for the most part was head injury and severe limb injury. Surprisingly, there was relatively few survivors of chest and abdominal injuries. The limb injuries and the head injuries were taking place from seats that were tumbling down the runway that had broken apart from the rest of the aircraft, and two sections of the aircraft that appeared to me anyway to have disintegrated for the most part. That was the type of injuries that we saw.
Flight 232 and the patients and the victims that we cared for will always be a part of the burn unit. We saw 6 major burn injuries that night that were admitted to our unit. The first patient that we received had an approximately 50% burn, and I think initially there was relief because initially we thought there could not possibly be anyone in that crash that we could help. We thought that there would be no survivors. When there were survivors, there was initial joy, and then when we saw the extent of injury, it was like, my God, how many are we going to see like this? The burn injuries were one thing, and we're used to dealing with burns. I think what we were not prepared for is the other injuries. There was so much laceration, shrapnel injuries, and broken bones. And we're used to seeing some of that, but these patients were very severely injured. They had multiple injuries. There was a lot of fear on their part, a lot of panic on their part, that they knew, I think, and they could sense that things were going to be okay, that we were going to get control of the situation. It was a unique situation because the families were not here right away. And in one area, I guess that gave us time to get the patients cared for and get them settled before we talked with the families. But it was made it, I think, a time where the patients probably were needier because they needed somebody there with them to reassure them, to hold their hand, to let them know what was going on. And so that's a role we filled until the families came. We take care of not only thermal injuries, but also all types of skin injuries. So if the skin is denuded, if it is abraded, if they have an open wound, then we also see that kind of patient. And there was one youngster who had a lot of lacerations, fractured bones, and then also had what we call a friction burn or a road rash. And that is actually when they do have a friction injury or abrasion. And he had that on a large part of his body, and that too can be full thickness or 3rd degree. It will not heal on its own because the skin elements are gone, and so then that will have to be grafted. And so those are patients that we also cared for in the unit.
The scene is quieter now at St. Luke's emergency room after over 80 patients were rushed in here this afternoon. Now, survivors are recovering, and the reality of what happened is starting to sink in. The Hardman family was going to Chicago for a wedding, and they say when they crashed, it was chaos.
We were down in a position where our forehead was against the chair in front of us, and the floor panel next to me blew. I turned my head to look, and all this debris flew in my face. The floor panel came up because we assumed that we had landed safely. I mean, for a second, because we hit down, and then all of a sudden, all the noise happened, and everyone was upside down and screaming, and there was fire. And
when the plane just first hit, you know, it hit the wing. You could tell it wasn't right in the very beginning. And then when we got upside down, and you just tried to find your seatbelt, and I mean, you really didn't realize that, you know, until after you were out, you know, that you could have died in that.
For Ryan and Shelley's mother, the time before impact was possibly the last chance for her family to ever be together.
We held hands, and I told him I loved him very much.
Has there been a morgue set up?
They are setting up a morgue, and there are still some bodies inside the fuselage, and that's how we just really don't know the answers yet. It's being set up here somewhere on the airport grounds. I don't have the exact location at this point in time, and the bodies have not been removed. They're still out there being investigated by the board.
All of the bodies are still out there now?
The board, as of approximately a half hour ago, the bodies were still there.
When I was going to the scene, the first reports that I had is we had potentially 200 victims, and you had to start thinking of how you were going to handle 200 victims. Processing that number, the magnitude of that was somewhat overwhelming, but fortunately when I got to the scene, the numbers quickly reduced to 100 to 120, which is still a large number. But our major concern whenever we go to a site like that, my major concern at that point in time was making sure that nothing was disturbed that could potentially help us in identifying bodies. We had 3 different teams, had a biopathologist going into the three areas that we gridded the field off. We took pictures of the individuals as they lay, and also had scribes writing all the descriptive things or the things we felt were important besides taking the measurements from our coordinate. So we had a lot of people taking pictures and taking down information. I think one of the things that we wanted to make sure is too much. There's no such thing as too much information. We could always sift through what we didn't need, but we wanted to make sure we took down everything. We were observing everything we could and taking pictures as much as we could. We took lots of pictures both on the field and in the morgue as well. Once we got their bodies numbered and then marked by the coordinates, they were then removed by the Air Guard personnel and taken to the refrigerated trucks at the temporary morgue. We removed 53 bodies from the field by noon. The victims who were on the field, their injuries were severe trauma, just tremendous force injuries, broken bones, chest injuries, head injuries, neck injuries. That was 53 people. And the 47 people who were in the aircraft were almost all burn injuries or smoke inhalation injuries. So it was divided almost half and half. And then, of course, we had 10 persons that died in the hospitals that we ended up, before we had closed the morgue down, and those also were evaluated. There was a good reason why they picked the morgue. We had concrete floors with drains, the ventilation, we opened up doors on both ends. So the temporary morgue was not made to be a morgue, but it was ideal. The disaster committee planned well. So once the bodies were had their total body x-rays, and then moved to the dental x-ray area. And they went through that process. Then they went on to the fingerprinting area, the FBI area, and they were in charge of that. The FBI from around the area and the region handled that aspect of it. And once that process, and I must say that once the body entered our identification area, they were given a person, a volunteer with a file that was not to leave that body as it traveled through this whole process. And we wanted to make sure we did not lose the file or get bodies mixed up in the process. And that was key to our organization. One thing we really need to emphasize that we called them trackers, and they did an excellent job in making sure that no one else got a hold of that file. We had a lot of people demanding that information at various times, the dentist, the medical examiner, or just United Airline people or whoever. We wanted to make sure, and they were charged, only a few people could have access to that file, and that turned out to be very critical in many cases. We had to rely on a lot of volunteers who were not used to seeing this type of trauma. We're not used to seeing autopsy. We're not used to seeing the methods needed for positive identification, the dental aspect, the fingerprinting aspect. And in some cases, jaws have to be removed, and in some cases, fingertips have to be removed because of the burning, the decomposition, and mutilation. You have to inject, for instance, the fingertips to get good fingerprints. So a lot of individuals, including funeral directors, are not used to this type of standard forensic procedures, and it was shocking. And of course, questions were raised as to the necessity of doing this, and that was an issue we had to deal with pretty strongly. And it was something that we didn't anticipate, because we're, as forensic pathologists, and as pathologists, we know we have to do, but as volunteers who are not used to dealing and seeing this type of injury, this type of catastrophe, had a difficult time understanding. So we had, I would say that if I had to do it over again, I would say we had to sit down with these volunteers and say, this is what you may expect, this is why we are doing it. It may seem extraordinary, but it is necessary. And as soon as we got the autopsies done, they were moved across the aisle to the morticians, to the funeral directors, and they were immediately involved. And again, the trackers were with these people the whole time.
There was a lot of paperwork to be done, and we had a staff of funeral directors' wives, funeral directors' mothers, anyone who would be familiar with the technicalities of death certificates, burial permits, transfer permits, cremation permits, all the necessary things that had to be done before that body could go out. So, and those things all had to be produced and then double-checked last minute and put with the shipping papers and sent out then to the casketing area. In some instances where there were burn cases, they went into what's called a Ziegler case, which is a metal insert, which is sealed and put inside the casket. And in this instance, we used sealed caskets also. So those bodies were double sealed. And then they were placed in the shipping case and the shipping papers put on. From that time on, it was a matter of scheduling, either flying out of Sioux City or being transported to Omaha or Sioux Falls by hearse, and then out by plane.
The area where the accident took place was in a secure area of the airport. We have very strict guidelines that we must comply with the Federal Aviation Administration, both from the aspect of safety and security. It became extremely critical during this incident to isolate the area and secure it from a safety factor. First of all, we needed to carry out the rescue effort, and if we had opened it up to the public, it would have hampered that task considerably. At that point, it then becomes a matter of preserving the wreckage. And again, we did not want the public in that area, and felt like it was very critical that the area remained secure until the accident investigation was completed.
One of the security problems you have, you're dealing with a lot of agencies you've never dealt with before. A lot of federal agencies, you don't know what their identifications look like. Sometimes you're not sure who should be there or what authority they have when they arrive at that scene. We've had several people try to sneak press people in with them. They'd show their pass, and this person's with us, and they wouldn't have it. One of the things we went to for quick identification on the scene was use of ribbons, which we changed each day. This gave us a visual thing that we could see if the person had been checked. It was not the identification to let a person in the gate, per se. Every person, whether they had it or not, were still checked each time they came through the gate. And the reason for that, it'd be quite easy for them to take the ribbon off and pass it to somebody else. One of the things we would probably improve in the future is I think we should have a special disaster ID card that we have preset. And we can even get cameras to take pictures at the scene if we have to. Now, these cards could be color-coded, so you'd have quick visual to know what areas that person would have access to the scene. Whether they could just come in and help with the food service, or whether they're going to go out into the accident scene itself and mark evidence.
This would be one of the things which I'd say I do that we didn't have at this time, maybe we weren't prepared for. We found out that later that night, again, as the bodies come off and we attempted to secure, we also put a security net on the inside. Around the wreckage itself, that was quite difficult for two reasons. One, the amount of distance which it covered, I'd say over 1.5 miles of debris, and the cover for the people of the cornfields. And some of the cornfields were right up in with the wreckage, so we had to put people almost directly on those particular pieces. We thought originally we'd get by with maybe 20, 22 people on the inside perimeter. We had to go up to over 40 people to secure that.
I was asked to participate in the disaster planning team because of my role as a mental health professional in the community. The specific areas that I was to address were to be the debriefing of some of the first responders and to provide therapy for some of the families or victims of a severe crisis.
Well, I don't think there's any question that the disaster of this magnitude had a tremendous impact emotionally on every one of the rescue people, as well as it did not only in those that were initially involved in the rescue efforts, but even those that were working behind the scenes in many different areas and fields. Everyone has a specific way that they cope with stress. Everyone has their own way of dealing and coping with emotional trauma.
We found some areas that are going to definitely need to be worked on. The critical incident stress debriefing, mental health, mental wellness aspect of it. We see some need to work in that area to better organize that. It went extremely well. I don't think we had anyone that went without a debriefing or went without the correct counseling that they needed.
It was not so much during the initial attack, because most of the firefighters knew that our main objective was the fire in the main fuselage. Afterwards, some of our people had some problems with stress, mainly because they felt that there were some people that needed help, that maybe they could have saved someone's life by stopping and rendering assistance at that time. And so it did pose some stress problems after the fire situation was out. So we're dealing with that right now with our people. I hope it's going to eliminate itself during the next few weeks or months or whatever it takes to probably get some professional help, some people into some stress teams in to talk to our people that's faced similar situations.
So what we urge all people to do is establish peer counselors within their agency. It may not be necessary in an individual community for that community to set up an entire critical incident stress debriefing team headed up by psychologists who have worked in the area, but it certainly is important that every organization set up peer counselors within their organization.
If we would have relied on only the cities and counties that we had mutual aid, we wouldn't have too many people responding to this emergency. And I don't think we could have handled it with just the people we had mutual aid with. The other counties, the state of Nebraska, the state of South Dakota, and their counties that just automatically responded because they knew we needed help. You know, that was the key to this thing too, that we had the resources. And really, that's what it all boils down to, is when it started out, we knew we had the equipment, you know, to combat the fire, but we needed the resources. We needed foam, we needed manpower, we needed self-contained breathing apparatus, and we needed water. And these people provided the resources we needed. Without them, you know, with just the people we had mutual aid with, I'm not sure we'd have had enough to combat the disaster we had, the size of the disaster we had.
Number one is the type of people in the Midwest. Can what happened here in the planning and the coordination, the cooperation, and the working together be duplicated elsewhere? I think so. But it's got to be a we type of attitude, and you got to start now. You got to start before a DC-10 lands in your backyard. You got to start before the tornado comes over the bluffs, wipes out one of your neighborhoods. You got to start before the hazardous material spill happens, and the planning and the working together. Plans written on paper are worthless. I've got stacks of plans in my office that were written by different agencies and departments throughout the Midwest, copies of their plans that I've gotten, but I really question how many of those do people really know what's on the paper. Here, the plan really entails more of what we know about each other than what's on paper. Who's going to stop and read the book when the DC-10's hit the deck? Not me. I'm not going to stop then to read the book and find out what the other emergency response agencies in the community are supposed to do or what they have available. It's too late then. Then you get into lack of understanding, lack of communications. You get into turf battles. And that's where the problem starts. Start now. Start today. Involve everybody.